Nice to meet you, everybody. I'm up here on stage, but I'm not on my high horse, just to let you know. Just standing up here so I can do some pointing and some stuff. This is my first time to Birmingham, by the way. So. No, it was nice. I was pleasantly surprised. It's been everyone has been really friendly. So and I noticed when I got off the New Street train station, all I can see is young. The average age is like 29 or something. It's like there's young people everywhere. But Andy told me that they cleaned all the homeless people off the street, and then I was walking through New Street Station. I came out of where the ticket barriers are, and there was a couple of police officers, 6'3" in high-vis jackets, all the tricks on the belt, the back belt and everything. And then I turn in, there's a Boots, and I see someone in the window, it looks like a cop, but it's not. It's a cardboard cutout of a cop. And I thought they're advertising something, or it's public safety, and then I go to another shop, and there's another one. And I turn over, so they're like scarecrows, basically, right? That's interesting. I've never seen that before. So that was really interesting. So I'm gonna give you a little master class tonight. Okay, this is a very deep subject. You could spend 2 hours just going into talking about the minutia of media coverage, just the media coverage of ISIS. Or I could talk about Syria, for just the minutia of how you're getting it. So what I've done is I've boiled down 3 sections. So we're going to look at ISIS. We're going to look at very sophisticated propaganda. I'm going to extrapolate it. I'm going to show you how they do it. All the little memes and the little devices that they use to basically brainwash us to believe that there's something going on over there, and that we must be concerned about our security over here. So this is the general theme that we get. So in America, it's very intense. It's on a level that the BBC is powerful. It's a powerful media tool. But in America, they amp it up to another level with CNN and Fox. So it's almost like entertainment. So fear porn mixed with entertainment, masquerading as news, constantly 24/7. So we're getting bombarded with one crisis after another. Just when you think you've got your head around the crisis, and it's Thursday, another one comes Friday. And just when you think you've just kind of figured out what's going on, by Sunday is another one, and Monday another one. And in the last 2 years, especially in the last 12 months, I have seen this accelerating to a rapid degree, like never before. Now this is what I'm perceiving through the television. This is what I'm seeing through the newspapers. But is this what is really happening on the ground? That's the big question. So they want us to be in a kind of a state of paralysis, intellectual paralysis, emotional paralysis, but is there really a threat? And if there is, what is the size of that threat? Is it realistically going to threaten you where you sit at home or in your community? Those are really fundamental questions, and I'm telling you, the media are not interested in delivering the answers to those questions. They are interested in getting you absolutely paralyzed constantly, so you will just nod your head and say yes to whatever comes down the pipeline, be it legislation, policy, airport security, whatever. Okay, so I think luckily, on the whole, the average British person is more street smart maybe than the average American, because the average American, quite a few Americans love this stuff. They enjoy it in a way. It's part of their life. They like to be scared. They like horror movies. I mean, how many? You don't see very many British horror movies. America, they churn them out like a machine, like a dozen a week. Okay, Americans love to be scared. It's a tradition. Orson Welles proved it in The Day the Earth Stood Still. So I'm going to just try to demystify this to you, and also, just so you know who I am, I'm a journalist, I'm a writer, I'm just a generally all-around curious person. I did not study journalism in university, which means that maybe I can talk about it in a little bit different way. I studied art, okay? I have a degree in art and design, so I'm not talking down to you on this. I started off as a hobby, and the hobby became a kind of obsession, and it's still a hobby. I still look at it like a hobby, but it's also kind of like sport as well. How many of you enjoy sport? Follow a football team? Okay, I used to be obsessed with sports when I was younger, and all I did was I transferred my enthusiasm from sports into geopolitics. So I could tell you the point average of every basketball player in the NBA between 1970 and 1990, or the batting average of every baseball player from 1950 to, you know, and so I just transferred that enthusiasm from sports into geopolitics. Now I don't even follow sports, but I've been doing this for a number of years. The thing that got me into this was really the Iraq War in 2003. So I don't like to call it anti-war protesting. I was kind of more in the pro-peace, because language is important. But anyway, that's how I got started. I started blogging for other people's websites, and I started submitting articles, and I got tired of waiting and waiting, so I started a blog in 2009, and it's called 21st Century Wire. Raise your hands if you've seen it before or read anything on it. Okay, and then from there I got recruited to work for a guy named Alex Jones, who you've probably heard of, Infowars.com. I was editor from 2011 to 2012, and now I'm just focusing on my thing, which is 21st Century Wire. So, small operation. I'm also a geopolitical analyst for RT, Russia Today, and what else? I've been on a few other programs talking about basically this stuff. So I try to give a condensed reality, not focusing on the fear so much, but more on the information. When you go to a doctor, how many of you have had a really big challenge, almost not life-threatening or something close to it, a serious injury or ailment where you were afraid when you were suspecting that something might be happening, bad happening to you? I can raise my hand. This happened to me last year, okay? I caught an airborne pathogen when I was filming a documentary in Nevada, like similar to meningitis. I didn't know what it was, and so I was basically in the dark for 3 or 4 months, didn't get a diagnosis. Now, once you get information from your doctor, once they talk to you, or you go into the hospital, you're in emergency trauma care, whatever, as soon as they talk to you, you generally feel better, don't you? You calm down a bit. The information allows you it takes the fear away. Lack of information means that you're completely balled up in fear. Okay? This subject here is all about lack of information. Okay? There's a lot behind the scenes, so we're going to lift the veil a little bit, take the fear away, and look at it from an analytical point of view, what's really going on. So just to frame this a little bit, David and Goliath, I just picked up a book by Malcolm Gladwell, which is just out right now. It's a very good book, but it talks about really what we're dealing with here is a type of asymmetric warfare. Okay, this is the epoch we're living in right now. Nation state against nation state, like a la World War II, or even Korea, or even Vietnam. That's over. It's finished. Iraq was probably could have been possibly the last official nation-state versus nation-state conflict. Everything now is going into a new epoch, which is proxy wars, asymmetric wars, subterfuge, manipulation on a grand scale. Okay. Now, Lawrence of Arabia, ironically. So, great story. Everyone knows the story of Lawrence of Arabia, okay? So, that was a defining moment at that time around just the fall of the Ottoman Empire, okay? And everything that has ensued after that, the seeds were planted for the situation we have now, which are monarchies, like Saudi Arabia, Qatar, Bahrain, Kuwait, and the rest of them, okay? These are not democracies, but these are we're told, our best allies in the region. They're feudal monarchies, okay? But they're also our best customers. So, 100 years of war. So, the underdog wins, according to statistics, over the last 100 years, the underdog wins 30% of the time, okay? In any war, all wars and every war. So you're looking at, okay, let's say, you know, that South Park episode where Canada went to war with the United States. It's kind of a good one. So, Canada versus the US, what are the odds of that in reality? A conventional war, I'd say it's 70% in favor of the US, maybe more, 30% Canada. But if it turns into a guerrilla war or an asymmetric war, by the numbers, this is the last 100 years, all wars, all conflicts, Canada's odds improved from 28.5% to 63.6%. That's statistical analysis that's been proven through this. So that's just to set the scene. So when you're talking about ISIS, we're talking about Al-Qaeda, we're talking about the Ukraine, this is very much an asymmetrical playing field. So conceptions and misconceptions. ISIS is organic. ISIS is because of blowback. In other words, they're pissed off at us, so they're railing against us. This is called a term called blowback. Okay, that I would say is a misconception. But in the mainstream media, which I call consensus reality. So consensus reality is like, we're all here in this room, we all agree that I'm wearing a black jacket, okay? So we all say, yes, okay, Pat's wearing a black jacket, so everyone turns, you guys, it's black, of course it's black. So this is kind of what maybe the BBC does on a daily basis. So they're going to say, if they keep saying this grassroots organic movement, this Islamic Jihad, ISIS, they keep saying that over and over, everyone starts looking at each other and says, yeah, it's an organic grassroots jihad. And that's basically most of the country's public opinion. That's consensus reality. You come to a consensus, and that is the reality. Okay? But it's not the reality. Consensus reality is not real. Okay? But the media works very hard to get us to the point of accepting that. So, here's another one. The Islamic State, the Caliphate. Just by calling it a state, they're giving it validity. And they do it. How much do they do this? Every 10 seconds. So they've been plying us with this for the last 12 months, over and over. The Islamic State, it's not a state. It's nothing close to a sovereign state. They cannot really rightfully govern anything for long periods of time. That's being proven now. And it's not a caliphate, okay? So our media is promoting that concept and that concept. ISIS themselves can't do it. They need CNN, the BBC, the Times, the Sun, the Mirror. Without these outlets, there is no Islamic State. Because, trust me, the Arabs don't refer to it as a state or a caliph. They call them Daesh. Daesh, you know what that means? It's something, it's like a bug that you step on, sticks to the bottom of your shoe. That's what they call ISIS. We're calling it the Islamic State, the Caliphate. I mean, we're doing all the heavy lifting for these maniacs, basically. Okay?
And then they drag you into court, and then they say, look at the state of you.
Yeah. Yeah.
Not that bad.
He says, who's done that to you? Look at the state of you. You have state.
The state, yeah, exactly. So here's another one. ISIS is wealthy. ISIS is wealthy. ISIS has got loads of oil, and they're raking in billions of dollars in kidnapping, extortion fees, and all this other stuff. That is absolute propaganda. Why are they putting out this propaganda about ISIS being rich? Use your common sense dictates. The reason they're doing that is because they don't want you to ask. The real question is, where is the money coming from? Okay? Now, did you notice oil prices really tanked in the last 10 months? Like ridiculous. The oil went from $100 a barrel and was scraping down around 50, 60 in some cases. Okay, there is no money in oil, trust me. But if you do the math, if ISIS controlled a refinery in Raqqa or Syria, they would have to move something like, I don't know, 50,000 barrels a day by truck to somewhere in Turkey that eventually makes it to a port. That would easily be able to be tracked by satellite photographs, aerial photographs, but has it? No. Okay, ISIS does not have an oil supply. And you'd have to hold the guys at the refinery at gunpoint to work for free. Okay, that in itself is a difficult proposition. So in other words, more mythology. Because they don't want you to ask the question is, where is the money coming from? We'll look at that in a minute. So, privatized paramilitary force. That's what ISIS is. Now, I'm talking about ISIS, we'll talk about Syria and Iraq and Yemen, but it's a privatized force. It has a privatized command structure. We have seen this before in history, I believe, and we'll show that. So, privatized command structure, not unlike Blackwater, not unlike a mercenary firm, okay? ISIS will strike the homeland. That is a misconception, but this is a powerful meme right now in the United States. It's popping up everywhere. ISIS is going to invade through the Mexican border constantly. I know, I laughed as well, but when you start running into people in the streets that believe this, in Texas, in New Mexico, I'm no longer laughing. I'm a little bit afraid because the disinformation is so powerful. There's people actually believe that someone who doesn't speak any Spanish, there's no hummus and falafel in Mexico either, so they wouldn't last more than 5 minutes. Okay, but there's ISIS in Mexico. Some people made a meal out of that in the last month, and I can tell you right now, and we were one of the only people to refute that, and we act for refuting that because people didn't want to believe that ISIS wasn't in Mexico. How bizarre people's mindsets are getting now. This is especially in America. So, ISIS is going to strike the homeland. So, ISIS in Mexico. So, perception is everything. Symbolism. Colonialism versus neocolonialism. We're going to talk about that. Intimidation, subjugation, submission, compliant. So this is the kind of progression. So in order for this to work, you need to invoke symbolism. What is ISIS is all about symbolism. YouTube videos, playing the music in the background, waving the flag, these triumphant Toyota truck convoys going through. So again, our media is providing all of the PR muscle for that, okay? If we didn't play that, they would not be getting that kind of publicity. But we are playing that. So we're doing the publicity for them. Should make you ask that question, why? Why would you want to promote these sort of organizations? So that's a photo that everybody's seen, Abu Ghraib. You have to understand from an Arabic point of view, from, let's say, the lower sort of working class, unemployment through the roof, somebody's paying $200 a month to be a soldier. Believe it or not, that's a decent wage. If you're in one of these Al-Nusra Front, ISIS, Free Syrian Army, whatever. These are the groups running amok right now. It's at $200 a month. That's about 120 quid a month. How could you survive on 120 quid a month in this country? Not very much, no. But there, not bad, okay? They don't have a social safety net. So the recruitment It's fertile for recruitment. Some organizations are paying $500 a month. Some are paying $1,000 for officers. So they move from group to group. Okay, so our government has spent the last couple of years promoting the concept of the Free Syrian Army, which is really a myth. Moderate rebels in Syria, they don't really exist. Maybe they did, or a few of them do, but generally, if you're a mercenary or you're a privateer, you'll go where the money is. And this is the kind of thing that provides the ideological underpinning for those sort of decisions. So, yes, blowback is real. The US and the NATO countries and coalitions are responsible for these sort of images, definitely fuel a certain faction to want to be extremely militant. So, and when the US comes rolling in with their tanks with skulls on the front, playing heavy metal music, or Chris Kyle, American Sniper, skull on the cap, skull patches. So, in a religious country, and they believe that certain things are satanic, they see Satan coming, all guns blazing. That's the way they look at it. Okay, we don't look at it that way. Americans definitely don't look at it that way. They're like, we're going to go in and kick some ass, you know. We're going to go in.
They're not far out now, are they? Satanic application.
Well, it is what it is.
The roots of it.
Yeah, it is what it is. And that's how, it doesn't matter whether it is or it isn't, it's how it's perceived. And from the Arabic point of view, from the Iraqi point of view, it's definitely perceived as not good. Okay? So, but we don't like to talk about that. You know, it's just part of Hollywood. Clint Eastwood made a blockbuster film, American Sniper, you know, with Bradley Cooper, famous actor. Everyone loved it. I went to see it in the cinema. People were crying, gushing, and whatever. And I couldn't believe the reaction people were having. It was like an emotional, religious experience. And I'm like, this is like a really sophisticated piece of propaganda. Very effective. But anyway. So, democracy's coming. So this is our ideological underpinning. It's no longer anymore. You notice you don't hear a lot of talk about this because they pretty much killed this after 10 years of occupation in Iraq and Afghanistan. So it's not really viable to use this as a justification anymore from our point of view to when our politicians speak to us. This doesn't really fly anymore. It's that you have to update the software a little bit. So they're doing a little patch right now and updating it. So that was blowback, okay? So democracy is coming. That's what democracy looks like to an Iraqi. It's not very good. So you know, where do the militias come from in Iraq? Where do they come from? They're people who are defending their neighborhoods from a foreign invading force. What would we do in this country if there was a foreign invading force? We'd probably band together in militias and we'd probably defend our neighborhoods, right? We'd be patriots for doing that. So the Iraqis who were defending they're patriots. And so what are the Americans or the NATO soldiers then? If the Iraqis are patriots defending their homeland, and the Americans or the NATO allies are flying 5,000, 6,000 miles, invading, shooting, blowing stuff up, commandeering houses, you know, press gangs practically. What is that? That's it. You know, it's pretty obvious what it is. So this whole facade that we've been brainwashed with for the best part of the last 15 years is no longer working anymore. So now you're seeing some really weird stuff appearing in terms of messaging on our side. So, the birth of ISIS. So, it was in 2007, the U.S. foreign policy openly sought to pursue war against Iran, Syria, this is the end of the Bush administration, just at the tail end, and against Lebanon, Hezbollah, Syria, while undercutting pro-Iranian factions in Iraq, Shiite factions. So, which at the time the U.S. Was still occupying. So failing to accomplish this directly, the U.S. planned a not-so-covert proxy war that would include funding, politically backing, and even arming groups ranging from Muslim Brotherhood, militant cells, to people aligned with Al-Qaeda itself. That's what you're seeing in Syria, okay? So that's Tony Carlucci, good analyst, been doing it for many years. I could go into a whole seminar. There's a number of documents you can pull, very easy to go and research the roots of the Syrian insurgency, okay? Which is what really the Islamic State in Iraq, the Iraqi insurgency, the Syrian insurgency, that's where ISIS comes from, okay? ISIS is just a brand. Anybody can be ISIS. You just go and get the flag, print that out, print an A4 out, like Amit Kulabali did before the Charlie Hebdo attack to film his martyrdom video, printed it out on an inkjet, stuck it on the wall, talked to the microphone, okay, then after it's over, they show the video and the photographs. So he says, I'm ISIS. Print it out on your inkjet, you're ISIS, okay? That's how easy it is. So I was looking back in history, I'm like, what does this remind me of? This reminds me of the Barbary pirates. So you know your history along the Barbary coast. In the 16th, 17th, well, the late 1600s, all the way to the early 1800s, you had the Barbary pirates, which were basically running amok like ISIS, but on the sea, mainly. But basically robbing, stealing, kidnapping, killing, privateers, essentially. And they were being controlled by the king of Morocco at the time, Sultan Mohammed III. Okay, he was in control. Now, eventually the Americans brokered a deal, as a young country, the United States brokered a deal to end the Barbary pirates' siege of North Africa and that whole region, okay? But there was a king controlling, there was a monarch controlling. So this is, what you have to understand, terrorism is the same as organized crime. There is no, to me, there's no difference. It's just another type of organized crime. And when you look at organized crime, you look at the mafia needs to, they need banking services, don't they? So who provides the banking services for the Mexican drug cartel, for instance? Well, HSBC, right. So who provides the banking services for ISIS, or al-Nusra, or Al-Qaeda, or Al-Qaeda in the Arabian Peninsula? They need banking services, they need political cover, they need clout, they need...
car insurance.
They need everything.
Well, then Toyotas.
Yeah, sure.
You're going to need a group policy.
Yeah. So in a way, ISIS has got sand pirates, basically. So luckily, they're not on the high seas yet, but it's the Barbary pirates all over again. So instead of the Moroccan king, Sultan Mohammed III, who is the Sultan now? Notice the symbolism too. Not that the flag is exactly the same, but the colors. I think in terms of symbols. So I see some similarities here. I get the same sort of feeling from these historically. So this could be the modern day Sultan Mohammed III. This is the new king of Saudi Arabia, King Salman. Now, this is not a conspiracy theory. This is very well documented. There is a lot of Saudi Arabian support for terrorist groups. We've all heard this from many different experts and pundits. But we never hear that ever from Joe Biden. We never hear that from John Kerry, from David Cameron. We never know. That's kind of a verboten subject, because these guys buy more weapons and arms from Lockheed Martin, General Dynamics, BAE Systems, the list goes on. They are a #1 customer. Yeah, so they're Raytheon. This is our #1 customer. So it kind of turned a blind eye to this thing. So I'm not saying that this is the only source of funding for the insurgency in Syria or ISIS in Iraq. It's not. It's much more complex than that. There's a number of stakeholders. There's a number of stakeholders. Saudi Arabia is just one of them. So, Yemen, we'll go to Yemen a little bit later, maybe in the second half, but so this is kind of like Saudi Arabia's boots on the ground right now in Yemen is Al-Qaeda in the Arabian Peninsula, okay? They have the same objectives as Saudi Arabia, who's currently bombing Yemen. Identical objectives, same enemy, same objectives. We look at Syria. So the Syrian government, Bashar al-Assad, I'll detail this in a minute. So he's fighting against ISIS, al-Nusra Front, backed by Saudi Arabia, and he calls Hezbollah, which is a Shiite militia from Lebanon, to come help, door to door, street to street, house to house. They're fighting ISIS and kicking ISIS's ass in many cases. So our governments are trying to overthrow the Syrian government and trying to target Hezbollah. Israel has even done airstrikes on Hezbollah targets inside Syria more than once in the last 12 to 18 months. So the people who are fighting ISIS on the ground, they're our enemies in the West. Does this make any sense? It means that only certain people are allowed to fight ISIS and others aren't. The Iranians were fighting ISIS in Iraq 2 months ago. They went ballistic in Washington. This was like a nightmare for them. They couldn't accept it. They put pressure on the Iraqi government, withdraw the Iranian militias and troops, get them out, we'll come in and we'll bomb them out for you. Okay, clearly there's another agenda going on here. It's almost as if some people want to protect ISIS so that they can run amok for a long period of time and really destroy the nation state of Syria and destabilize Iraq to the point where you might need to divide it into 2 or 3 different sections. That's what it looks like. So, and again, in Africa, this is Al-Shabaab, another cutout organization, in my opinion. Boko Haram, Nigeria. This guy is almost like a comedian. He appears every few months on the news. This is Boko Haram spokesperson. Interesting character.
Is that a green screen where you put a crazy background in?
Yeah, that's a green screen. Yeah, I'll show you some more green screens in a few minutes. Here's another one, Abu al-Baghdadi. Abu Bakr al-Baghdadi. I don't want to get into the mythology of this guy, but you do a little bit of research, and no one has seen him since 2006, 7, something like that. For all we know, he doesn't exist. So he's an avatar. And we had another one before him, was called al-Zawahiri in Iraq. Another avatar. Didn't exist. It was almost like mythology. And this is the thing, this is the face. You need a face. For the media needs a character. They need a face. It was Bin Laden. Bin Laden goes. Al-Zawahiri is the face. Now this guy's the face. And there's a whole series of these avatars. And they're there, so we can relate to them. These guys sell the story. His face sells the story. Without the character, we can't. It's harder for us to buy the whole narrative. So this is how show business works. This is how entertainment works. This is how literature works. This is how fiction works. And apparently this is how ISIS and the war on terror works too. So there he is. So this is the greatest of all avatars. The greatest pulling power, star quality, you name it, he is the top dog, Osama bin Laden. Okay? Have you ever seen Iron Man 3? This is the Mandarin. Okay? So the plot in Iron Man 3 was they would just film this guy, who's played by Ben Kingsley. They did a few fake shots, a few assassinations. They broadcast that out, send it to the media, and they say, the Mandarin struck again. And so Hollywood's putting this out at the same time we're dealing with these ISIS beheadings, okay? And there's more truth to that aspect of the deception than we realize. It might seem like entertainment, but it's a lot more than that. That's the Mandarin. He's just a drunk, unemployed actor that, I don't know, they're giving him free drugs and tins of lager and women, and then he'd do whatever they told him to do. So this is the reality of Syria, and wait a few years. If we make it a few years down the road, we'll soon learn that Syria is one of the biggest propaganda schemes of our time. When the dust settles, if it does, it will be revealed. It's already being revealed. This is Professor Abu Khalil. He's one of the best Arabic bloggers. So guys like, Glenn Greenwald and all these guys, he's someone that maybe they read regularly, and he gives a really good objective account of what's going on. So, but you can come to these conclusions yourself. So, Muammar Gaddafi, this is how the current genesis started. So, Gaddafi, leader of Libya. So what happened? You remember? Can we even remember back to 2011? There's been so much stuff, one after the other. I'll give you a little recap of what happened. Libya, lowest debt ratio per capita in the world, most stable currency, the dinar, one of the best social services, safety nets in the world, okay? Clean water, electricity's running, free education. Even if you get married, you get $10,000, okay, from the state. So this guy is a hardcore socialist. He modeled his government after Soviet single-party structure. So he's a communist, essentially. But anyway, he deposed the king of Libya back in the early 1960s, I believe. That's Muammar Gaddafi. He took the blame for the Lockerbie bombing, and that's been more or less disproven by a lot of very respected journalists and scholars that Libya was not responsible for the Lockerbie bombing. Okay, but he admitted it, did a mea culpa, because he wanted to get back in the game of the international community. Cozy up and get Shell and BP involved back in Libya's high-quality oil refinery business. Sweet Brent crude, the best oil in the world. If you have a big military, you need the best fuel. Libya has the best fuel if you're running a military. So what happened to Gaddafi? Color revolution happened on the back end of the Arab Spring, and news reports started circulating through our media saying that Gaddafi was using his air force to shoot protesters. Trying to work out the logistics of that. Anyway, doesn't matter. It made a good headline. So he was using his air force against his own people. And he was shooting, the military were shooting protesters, peaceful, flower-carrying Arab springsters coming in and, wanting democracy. Those were armed gangs burning down government buildings, okay? That was the Arab Spring in Tripoli and Benghazi. Now, what would happen in this country if thousands of armed gangs started setting parliament on fire? What do you think the police or the military's response would be? Do you think they'd step back and say, oh, just let them sort of get on with it and we'll sort it out on Monday? What would happen? What would happen if 5,000 of those took over a city in Britain? It would end up being a siege, wouldn't it? Right? That's what happened in Libya. Okay? So anyway, we bought the lie, and so our political leaders lobbied to the United Nations saying we need a no-fly zone because these protected people of Libya, right? And they did. They passed UN Resolution 1973, and they got their no-fly zone. But the no-fly zone soon became a go-bomb zone. And they bombed Libya back into the Stone Ages. And now you have the failed state, which you have today. Who did NATO work with? On the ground, they worked with Islamic fighting groups. Okay? I could do a whole presentation on who's leading those. One of those is an ex-Gitmo detainee named Abdel Hakim Belhaj. who was released from Gitmo in 2002, appears in Libya. He's working with NATO. You can do the math on what you think is going on behind the scenes there. But the point is, you have a failed state now. Al-Qaeda, ISIS, a lot of people moved guns, weapons, transferred to Syria. That's a fact, okay? Not a theory. That's a fact. Quite possibly, this is the reason why...
War to Africa. Didn't you want to help Africa? War to
Yeah, yeah. Gaddafi invested multiple billions of dollars in the great man-made water project to make the desert green, and he wanted to have a central bank of Africa with a gold-backed currency. So basically Switzerland offshore in Libya, imagine how much capital would be flowing in there.
He went against the dollar, and that was partly...
Yeah, well, he just basically wanted to do something on his own, which is bad news, basically. So what was the biggest news story of the last month regarding Libya? You watch the news, you've seen the boats, all the people on the boats. I watched the coverage on every single channel of all the boat people and the boats have capsized, oh, they're dying, oh, the Italians can't handle it, oh, the Greeks. Not one mention. Those are the same media outlets that promoted the takedown of Libya enthusiastically. Running disinformation, lying, promoting the bombing, showing the airplanes, all the war weapons porn. Al Jazeera was involved in that as well. Okay, no mention of that. Why Libya is a failed state. Do you think there would be thousands of Eritreans and Ethiopians trekking through Libya if this guy was still running his country? No, it wouldn't be. It's a sieve now. It's a failed state. Our governments are responsible for that, but no one wants to take responsibility because that's 2011. That's like ancient history, but it's not. So this guy, much maligned, often misunderstood, Bashar al-Assad, same deal. So this is a continuation of Libya. So what can you say about this guy? He's still on his feet and has taken a few good shots, okay, if you consider that. So he's fighting ISIS, he's fighting al-Nusra, he's fighting all these foreign terrorists who are besieging his country, okay? And what does he get for it? We're still calling for regime change. So when you get rid of this guy, what do you think you're going to get? We go back to Gaddafi, look at Libya, it's a failed state. Most certainly Syria would be a failed state for a number of years. It already is becoming a failed state. Take the government, decapitate the government, and who knows what will fill that vacuum. So ISIS this week has just sacked Palmyra. This is an ancient city. So you see this is from the Daily Mail. These are very emotive images. I mean, I like my ancient history. So when I see this, 7,000-year-old civilization, potentially ISIS is putting C4 explosives on the bottom of all these columns, and they're just going to detonate it like the Buddhas in Afghanistan. It's a horrific thought, isn't it? We don't want to see that, do we? So, lo and behold, just as this is happening, all the U.S. Ashton Carter, U.S. Defense Secretary, they're all saying we need to consider putting at least 5,000 troops on the ground. And all the voices from the U.S., all the military experts, boots on the ground. I mean, come on, we got to save Palmyra, right? So, problem, reaction, solution. Problem, ISIS, taking over ancient city. Reaction, outrage. Solution, military intervention. They might not get military intervention, but you'd be damn sure they're going to be trying to push it, okay? So I think there's a game going on here. And we'll show you exactly how the game's played, but I think there's a game of manipulation going on. So I've been to some of these places in the Middle East, and they are amazing, and they are very fragile. And I'll tell you what, I was in Beirut a couple of years ago, and you see that the head of Nubia from the museum in Homs is selling for $500 on a flea market stand. You know, and there's tons of this stuff. You don't even know what it is unless you're an expert, and it's just turning up everywhere. But this happened in Iraq when the United States and the coalition invaded Iraq as well. The place was completely overrun and sacked. Stuff is turning up in art dealers all over the world, okay? That's just another sort of knock-on effect of this. But these are very emotive subjects for us in the West too, because this is our heritage as well as the Middle East. This is the foundation of civilization. So anyway, so this is what I was doing yesterday. Well, hopefully this works. So they're throwing some questions about ISIS, and you know what? I'm even getting confused talking about it. I'm not confused about ISIS, but the rhetoric. If you don't talk about the clandestine aspects of what goes on behind the scenes, in other words, we have the narrative for the headlines, we have the BBC, CNN, that's the nice consensus reality narrative, but there are intelligence agencies involved on different levels in some of these terrorist groups, and there have been throughout history. We even found that out with Northern Ireland to some degree, years and years later, okay? And in the Second World War, move forward, and eventually you find out that there is a lot of subterfuge and manipulation going on. So it gets really messy, but let's see if this works.
Winning because Iraqi troops just aren't fighting the terrorists, says U.S. Defense Secretary Ash Carter.
The Iraqi forces just showed no will to fight. They were not outnumbered. In fact, they vastly outnumbered the opposing force, and yet they failed to fight. They withdrew from the site.
ISIS is winning because the U.S. is not helping enough, says Iraq's Interior Minister.
On the ground, we feel that it is not enough support from the American to defeat ISIS.
ISIS is winning because the U.S. hasn't done anything at all, says Iran. Not a damn thing, to be precise, and it's in fact the U.S. which has no will to fight these terrorists. A blame game is in full swing. Not sure about America's role here, but it looks like Iraqis might really be lacking will. I wonder why. Once the fourth largest army in the world, one of the strongest in the Middle East, was disbanded. It happened in 2003 as occupation began. The new army, created by American and British instructors amid complete chaos in Iraq, took full control over the country just 4 years ago. The Iraqi army is 4 years old. I wouldn't expect much, so why does America? Let's ask Patrick Henningsen, geopolitical analyst and founder of 21st Century Wire. He's in the know with us from London. Patrick, surely the U.S. was training Iraqi troops for around a decade. The army is basically an American project. What went wrong? Why so unsuccessful? And was this what America expected?
Yeah, this is a perfect example of how it's impossible just to throw money at a problem, and I believe that the technocrats in Washington or in the Pentagon thought that if they threw enough money and enough military training and enough U.S. contractor inflated budgets at the problem over the course of a decade, that somehow out the other end would appear magically a viable Iraqi security force, and that's just simply not the case. I think history has proven that it's a total failure. But you have to take into consideration the specific, not just the cultural characteristics of Iraq, but also the near and the long-term history of Iraq. And you can't really just build a force out of the near history, specifically U.S. bombing and almost over a decade-long occupation in Iraq. The U.S.'s main objective was to disband militias and also to increase the sectarian divisions in that country between Sunni and Shiite. So the U.S. trainers seemed more concerned, from what I saw, with getting rid of Shiite militias in the latter stages of that program, and not necessarily, these are the people who could have fought back the Islamic State or ISIS militants in local areas and sub-regional areas, and that a lot of the resistance was disbanded by the U.S. over the course of a decade that could have repelled ISIS right now. So I believe the U.S. holds ultimate responsibility for the advance of the so-called Islamic State in Iraq and Syria.
Nevertheless, Washington is very outspoken about its vital role in the campaign against ISIS. I want to listen, and you to listen, of course, to what the Iraqi Interior Minister told RT.
We are receiving, many announcements saying from other countries that we are supporting Iraq, but on the ground, I say clearly that Iran was the first in everything to support Iraq.
Well, Iran is helping more than anyone else, says the Interior Minister. This is from Iraq. Does it come as a surprise to you?
Well, all I know is that there were people in Washington that were absolutely fuming when Iranian military commanders were leading Shiite militias to retake the city of Kirkuk only a couple of months ago. It's almost as if the world was coming to an end politically in Washington because they just couldn't bear the fact that Iran might be leading the charge against ISIS, and of course did anything in their power by using various forms of political subterfuge in Baghdad to try to get the Iraqi military leaders to clear out the Iranian effort to root ISIS out of those areas. So again, what is this that only certain people are allowed to fight ISIS and others aren't? I think Iran has shown a clear resolve to want to tackle this problem head on with boots on the ground, even putting some of their military, highly ranking military commanders at risk, which is something that maybe necessarily the U.S. hasn't done yet. So for whatever reason politically, you can argue which way or that way, but Iran has shown that they do have the resolve and the commitment to deal with the ISIS problem. And I don't see why we should stand in their way, because aren't we all in the same boat that we want to get rid of ISIS? That's what I thought until I saw the the objections coming out of Washington in the last couple of months.
But why? Why would Washington object to essentially taking out ISIS altogether?
Well, for starters, it does make them look bad because they can't be seen as the savior. So if Tehran is seen as the savior, it's a complete disaster because the whole narrative that Iran is axis of evil crumbles right before your eyes. And that is the sort of narrative that's constantly being built up by Tel Aviv, neoconservatives in Washington, and other lobbies within the United States, and also in Europe and in Britain, that Iran is altogether evil and therefore has no place in the international community. And we could say the same thing about Hezbollah. Hezbollah has shown great determination and sacrifice to fight alongside the Syrian army in Syria against ISIS. And what does Hezbollah and Syria get for that, or Bashar al-Assad get for that? They get the complete scorn of Israel and the United States for that effort. So again, you're only certain people allowed to fight ISIS or fight the al-Nusra Front, and others are not allowed to. Only the U.S. is allowed to provide the solution. A perfect Hegelian dialectic, problem, reaction, solution, and only the U.S. or U.S.-led coalition forces or the GCC are allowed to provide the solution. And I think this is not going to be something that's going to be successful in the long term. It's already proven to be a failure right now, as we can see in Syria, the sacking of Palmyra. The U.S.-led coalition's airstrikes have done almost, it seems, nothing to halt the advance of ISIS. So what is the real agenda here? I think there's a deeper agenda, and I think there's a lot of people who have a stake in seeing the Islamic State go further and last longer as an antagonist in the region. There seems to be people who are also profiting from this as well. So I believe these are things that we need to be realistic and start looking at this now. That why are certain people appearing to support the Syrian rebels or the Islamic State militants or al-Nusra, and also these are the same people that Bashar al-Assad's army are fighting against, trying to preserve their nation state. It's getting very muddy very quickly now, but I think the truth is starting to come out.
And complex, to say the least. Patrick Henningsen with us in the Now from London, political analyst and founder of 21st Century Wire. Thanks so much.
So I struggled with that. It just gets confusing. There's too many factions. So I'm struggling with it, and I study it. What's the average news consumer looking at this? Just like, you basically, what happens? You switch off, don't you? You just switch off. It's easier. It's too complicated. They've made it complicated. But I'll tell you what, it's not going to be complicated when more draconian security measures get dropped down here or in America because of the threat of ISIS. Okay? Well, that's very simple. This is like you take it and don't ask any questions, okay? So what I'm saying is that there's a lot more going on here. I think we can figure this stuff out if we study it and we talk to our friends and we share the knowledge that we have with people we know, at the pub, at work, friends, family, dinner parties, whatever. Because believe it, this is a game. This is a game that's being played. That's all it is. It's a big chess game. Although the pieces on the chessboard are quite dangerous. Okay? That's all it is. It's a chess game. So it's nothing more. So, how much time have we got?
I'm just going to go.
Go far. Okay. How many of you are familiar with Operation Mockingbird? Okay. This was a program put into play in the United States in the 1960s, whereby the CIA and NSA would have implanted their people in editorial positions of all the major newspapers, all the broadcast networks. And this is to be able to control and manipulate various narratives, okay? And ultimately to form public opinion. Have you ever had David Shaler speak here?
Yeah.
Okay, he's hard to get a hold of. He's elusive, yeah. But he wrote a really good book with Annie Machon called Spies, Lies, and Whistleblowers a few years ago. And I interviewed David once about this book, and he was telling me how he got recruited by MI5. They put an ad in the paper, I think it was the Telegraph, I'm not sure, and it said, Godot is waiting, or something like that. You had to be a little bit smart to figure it out. You had to be well-read, you know, some good literature. So that play, Waiting for Godot, is a classic play. And I think David went to Oxford College. I can't remember which. I think he went to an Oxford college. So anyway, Waiting for Godot. So David Shaler was working for the intelligence services while he was working for the Telegraph. So, and he alluded to me that there are quite a few others doing the same thing. So that's the British equivalent of Operation Mockingbird. So CNN is breathtaking. This is like an amazing operation. So I'm going to single them out, and NBC. And we got a few wonderful case studies, but this is only scratching the surface. So the people we see in the media, this is William Casey, he's the director of the CIA. We'll know our disinformation program is complete when every American in the public believes, or everything they believe is false, essentially. So that's a giant sort of sweeping psyop that he's describing there. So basically, completely in the dark, the mushroom principle, I won't repeat what that is, but you know that how do you grow mushrooms? You keep them in the dark and you feed them things. So this is what we get in the States. If you live in America, that's what you get every day. Big, I wish I had the music. They cue this music. ISIS has its own theme tune now. And it goes, dun, 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 and ISIS. And then Wolf Blitzer comes after this with more pumping music. And it's all very kind of like, yeah, gosh, you get, you know, if you had a cup of coffee, you'd have a heart attack. So, and this is what we get too, and this changes heightened alert. This is news in America. What is that? There's nothing going on there. It's just absolute fear tactics. Okay, this is what we get constantly, okay? I'm aware of it, so I just kind of study it, but some people might look at this and they really get afraid. Thousands, millions of people are affected by this. And guess what? They will absolutely back any military intervention, anywhere, as long as it's to get rid of those, you know, pests, they call them. So this is John Pilger, who I respect very much, great filmmaker, Australian. Journalists are never real journalists if they are agents of power, no matter how they disguise that role. I totally am on board with this statement. Okay, and there's plenty of Mockingbird-type characters working in the media. Here's a good one. This was when the Syrian thing was really just getting started. This is Danny Dan with Anderson Cooper. So that's Anderson Cooper, very seasoned. You could say, yeah, he'd be a very good Mockingbird candidate. Turns out he was recruited by the CIA, he says, when he came out of college. Maybe he's still working for them. I don't know for sure. What I do know is that guy was promoting the Syrian opposition. His name was Syria Danny. And he's British, but he was sort of transplanted to Syria. They caught him. Did anybody see the video? They caught them staging a newscast with speakers playing bombs and artillery and stuff like that. And he was on the earpiece with CNN saying, "Oh yeah, cue the explosions. Yeah, we're going to get those in a minute. Okay, the bullets." And then so he was coordinating with these guys to create a fake news report. Okay, so this was just designed to create. He's the face. He's the avatar. He's like the opposite of al-Baghdadi. He's the avatar of the opposition. He's the face of the opposition. Nice, British educated, young Syrian guy. Hey, who's going to argue with that? But it was completely fake. For all I know, he was an agent. Okay? Well, he was acting as an agent. I don't know what capacity he was in, but that's definitely acting as an agent. So this Syrian. So this is what you don't see on the news. How many times have you seen a pro-Assad rally on the news? Never. Okay? I saw them. I saw at least one when I was in Beirut, okay? And they're happening all the time, okay? There are thousands and thousands of soldiers fighting against the terrorist insurgency. You won't see it on the news, but they're dying as well, okay? But they've been illegitimized by our government because that doesn't fit into the narrative that we want of the outcome of regime change. End of story. So we just don't see this. But it's real. That's Mockingbird, censored. So Richard Engel, this is NBC's top reporter. Remember Brian Williams, this NBC guy, said he got sacked for lying about taking artillery while he was in a Chinook, right? That was small fry compared to what this guy did. He was kidnapped by pro-Assad Shiite militia, so we're told at the time. Did the rounds on the news. He was a hero. Oh, and a journalist risked his life. Turns out that the whole kidnapping was fake. Okay? They even went so far to do the and Shiite in the background for this particular shot. Okay? Total fraud. This guy, you can't find him now. He's disappeared. They've locked him in a cupboard somewhere. So there he is with his captors, and they lied about how their captors shot and killed their guide, and endless lies, totally. And this was used at the time to sway public opinion in favor of an anti-Damascus stance in America. And there were talks going on at that very moment. So this was absolutely Mockingbird. And this guy's an award-winning journalist, so remember what John Pilger said in that quote. And this is what we get when they're done with Syria. North Korea. They ramp this up every 6 months in America. Kim Jong-un, new missiles. They show footage of missiles constantly. Oh, could they hit the United States? Well, we're not actually sure yet. We don't know if they've developed any intercontinental ballistic capabilities, but certainly there's something that Kim Jong-un really wants to develop. What's Kim thinking? I don't know. We'll get into the mind of Kim Jong-un in the next segment. So it's just endless speculation. Okay, here's the other one. Russians hacked the White House. You didn't hear about this story. Apparently CNN had nothing better to do 2 months ago on a Monday. They ran this one. It's not true. They did it this is national news. 2 straight days, Russia hacks the White House. Turns out Russia didn't hack the White House, but they said when they broke this story, they had proof. The proof never materialized. What is this designed to do? Public opinion. Russia attacking us, getting close to us, getting into the White House computer servers. We should be afraid of Russia. Putin's up to no good, etc., etc. It's not real. It's a fake story. It's not even good enough to get in the New York Times. That should be national news, right? Should be in the Washington Post. Didn't make it, because it was fake.
In war, the first thing to go is the truth.
Yeah, well, this is a running war that we're involved in, and it's a multiple front war. So here's another one. Free speech event, Garland, Texas. ISIS attack a couple of weeks ago. Do you think that, this looks like a completely staged event. We came out and said so immediately, no one has ever refuted the articles we published on this. Because we're probably, I believe we're probably correct. But this is what happened. Threat level was raised the next day to Bravo level. Bravo level, very, very impressive. So, and again, this is these sort of scales. So what happened? That ISIS attack, look at the timing of it. So-called ISIS attack in Texas. The Arab leaders were coming for an anti-terror summit the next 2 days later in Washington. So they raised the threat level. So the king of Saudi Arabia, they're all come. The United States means business. We're dealing with ISIS, right? Guess what else? The Patriot Act is due to expire next week. So there's a lot of pressure to renew it because of this. Okay? No coincidence here.
Is Delta the top one, is it?
Delta, yeah, Delta is the top. I have another chart that's got like Ernie, Bird, Big Bird. The Homeland Security one.
So that means we can have a split where we get to Delta 9 then?
I think you need a drink as well when it gets up to Delta at that point. So, and then they ran this. They've run this right after ISIS coverage. Female warriors on the front lines. A little segment on women on the front infantry lines. Okay. So basically, the subtext here, if you're in the Mockingbird game, is our women are even kicking ass. Okay, against ISIS. So we need to get everybody. We need basically to reinvade Iraq. So this is the kind of it's psychological warfare, but against ourselves. Okay.
What ISIS represents their sort of beliefs in the ancient sort of mythologies, isn't it?
Well, yeah, I mean, we can get into a whole diatribe about what ISIS means, the symbolism of that, but it's, and again, Wahhabism, which is a kind of extremist version of Islam.
I was thinking of
Yeah, Isis and Horus. Yeah.
The simple one.
Yeah, I mean, that's to do with symbolism. That may well very be the case, but, you know, that's, again, on a symbolic level. So that could be working subliminally, but, you know, that's another...
It's everything's subliminal.
Yeah, that's another area of exploration. So, Jim Cejudo, top propagandist. This is CNN's one of their top guys. These are all what they call... So, they say, our panel of experts. Pretty much you get the same guys every time. I mean, this is a small panel, too. So what do we have here? Ex-CIA operative Bob Baer. Ex-FBI informant, in other words, undercover jihadist. I forgot his name. This is Peter Bergen, who, he's probably, he's an author. I actually think he's probably legitimate, okay? Her, I'm not sure what her name is, but this is just an example. The same experts, terror experts, okay? How many of these people have connections with the CIA or the security services? Well, at least 2 out of 4. And these are the experts to comment. There's nobody, no independent journalists, no professors, no doctors, no. Can't have any of those. Just basically people who work for the Pentagon, retired generals, CIA operatives, former Guantanamo Bay torturers. One guy, Philip Mudd, who oversaw torture programs. He's a regular expert on CNN. These are the experts that give us commentary. Do you think this, you have state-run media with the BBC, but how's that any different than this? It's the same thing. They run adverts and the BBC doesn't. That's the only difference, okay? And this is more egregious because it's really over the top compared to the BBC. BBC, at least they've got some, they can downplay and they've got sort of subtlety and stuff. You don't have that at CNN. It's in your face. It's like Fox News is the same, okay? But this is very powerful stuff. So here's another one. Michael Weiss works for the Weekly Standard. Who runs the Weekly Standard? William Crystal, signatory to the Project for a New American Century, PNAC. And so he's constantly comes on to give his analysis about ISIS. And it's always same old. It's right in line with U.S. State Department foreign policy. And he's an author, expert. These guys did a special, I could pick it apart. When I have time, I would deconstruct it, point by point, lie after lie, and they spent $500,000 to produce these 20-minute segments, and they run them to you, and you listen, and you think it sounds good, but it's mostly lies, okay? So everyone's in the dark.
Do you think Michael Weiss is part of the intelligence apparatus?
You know what? I'd suspect it's pretty much anybody that's got some sort of affiliation with a neoconservative think tank or, works for a lobbyist group. I would say I'd put them as a potential someone who's maybe working as an operative. If not, they're doing the job for them anyway.
You can pretty well guarantee if they were opposing it, they wouldn't be out.
Yeah. So we'll take a short break, and then we'll talk about Yemen, and then I'll go into show you a really important segment, which is about informants, patsies, dupes, and other useful idiots. So that's a bit of a fun segment.
Let's say thank you.
So clearly, there are people who knew in advance about geopolitical things that were going to happen. They don't just happen, okay? So this one is very complex, very interesting. We actually have one of your guys from Yemen was here. He's a blogger. Churchill Karma, I think is his blog. Anyway, he left, but he shared some interesting stuff. So what's going on in Yemen? Okay, so what happened in Yemen? How did we get to this war in Yemen? I just want to share a little progression with you so that you can understand how this kind of step-by-step process works, okay? The United States led a coalition back in September and October to bomb ISIS in Syria and Iraq. We all remember this, right? Okay, that's when Obama announced we're going to go in and sort of bomb them. Okay. So the coalition was basically the U.S. and the GCC countries. That's the Gulf Cooperation Council. So Saudi Arabia, all the monarchies basically. That's the GCC, led by Saudi Arabia. They're the #1 monarchy, oil monarchy power in the Middle East. #2, arguably, you could say it's Qatar. #3, you could say United Arab Emirates, then Kuwait, then Bahrain. Okay, so this is an arms fair. I don't know where this is, but it could be somewhere in Europe. I'm not sure. Saudi is our best customer for arms. So the coalition airstrikes against ISIS, that was a warm-up in the fall. Now, I could tell you for a fact that the initial targets that were hit in those airstrikes were empty buildings. Okay, even CNN, one of CNN's reporters reported that. She didn't get the memo. She accidentally reported that. I think it was Ara Damon, I think was the reporter. That you can look up at 21st Century Wire. Bombing empty buildings. They said this coalition, the United States is very into coalitions because they don't want to be seen to be acting alone, okay? But the coalition didn't do a whole lot, okay? They maybe run sorties, very few dropping ordinances, until the Jordanian pilot was burned in a cage, supposedly, that even Jordan didn't get very aggressive in those bombing campaigns. But it was a dry run. It was a dry run for Yemen, for Saudi Arabia, okay? That's what that was all about. They didn't do a whole lot to subdue ISIS, as we know, because ISIS is still running amok 7-8 months later. So that was a dry run over Syria and Iraq, okay? Now, this is the political catalyst for Yemen. You remember Charlie Hebdo in January, okay? Now, when that was unfolding, all of a sudden, Yemen became the talking point, which sprouted out of Charlie Hebdo. How did that happen? Okay? How did that happen? So the Charlie Hebdo affair energized and sparked off the Yemen conflict. Okay? How is that possible? It was already going to happen, But what it provided was it helped provide a narrative for us that we can follow the little bouncing ball. So, let's look at that narrative. See how we got programmed to lead to Yemen, okay? So here's the supposed perpetrators of the two separate Charlie Hebdo attacks. Is the Kouachi brothers. This is who we want to focus on right now. So one of the Kouachi brothers, the media is a bit confused about which one actually went to Yemen. They changed the story at least once since they announced that, I believe initially Saeed was said to have traveled. Somehow they got all this information within hours of the Charlie Hebdo attack, whatever. So they said Saeed went to Yemen. Well, we find out that he had his passport revoked. So then the media changed the story and said that he traveled on Sharif's passport. Okay, so he was basically put on a no-fly list or something to that effect, and was under surveillance by the French security services even up to the time of the attack. That's a whole other seminar, Charlie Hebdo. So, before one French journalist, BMF TV, one guy, one French journalist magically spoke to him, and him, just minutes before they were executed, killed, or whatever. One French journalist managed to get them on the phone, and they said that they were working for Al-Qaeda in the Arabian Peninsula in Yemen. And then our media said, whoa, look, Al-Qaeda in the Arabian Peninsula, we need to do something about those guys. They're really bad guys. They're pulling the strings here. And then Anwar al-Awlaki, who's been dead since 2010, paid for his trip. Okay, so it just gets more fantastic when they roll this story out. Very few people are questioning it, the details of it. I find it interesting. So, they needed 48 hours, and this character appears on TV. He's from Al-Qaeda in the Arabian Peninsula against a green screen. Who knows where he is? Is he in Yemen? I don't know. Is he in Switzerland? Is he in Edgware Road? You don't know. It's against a green screen. So this is the so-called spokesperson of AQAP, Al-Qaeda in the Arabian Peninsula. So this joins all the dots. The story is perfect. Everything joins together nicely, okay? So, Al-Qaeda in the Arabian Peninsula. That's it. They're in Yemen. So we need to get into Yemen and deal with these guys, because these guys are bad news and causing trouble in Paris, okay? That's the story. That's the story, okay? Whether it's true or not, you really don't know. But that's the story. So, again, this guy, you couldn't buy the media coverage if you're Al-Qaeda. This is just one shop in Paris or in London, I can't remember, playing on every TV. Think of the media impressions, how many millions and millions and millions of media impressions, free advertisement these guys somehow managed to get. Isn't that incredible? And there's one agency that seems to have the scoop on all of this stuff. And they are called SITE, S-I-T-E. It's a media outlet based in Bethesda, Maryland, run by a gal named Rita Katz. Anyway, she gets the first scoop on all of these terror videos. It's quite impressive. So there's SITE, that's their logo. So this is, the graphic design from some of these ISIS publications. They even have the Al-Qaeda magazine called Inspire, with Bin Laden on the front, and it's like this coffee table magazine. I mean, it's so contrived, and it's all in English as well. Okay, so it's not even to an Arabic market, which is bizarre. But anyway, here's one of their little hit list here. This is straight out of Central Casting, as far as I'm concerned. Okay, so no one's asking the question. They talk about ISIS. They have a PR department. ISIS's publicity department, ISIS's financial department. So no one's asking the question, where is this stuff being produced? Okay, this is clearly being produced in some very good graphic design studios somewhere. We don't know where, what country it's in, but this is of a professional level, of a level of sophistication and communications that I'm sorry, I'm not going to, and in English, okay, that is not these guys running around on Toyota pickup trucks. Okay, they're not making this stuff, okay? And you could easily trace and find out where this stuff, most of this coming from. There's digital forensics, there's lots of sophisticated ways that you can track and trace a lot of this stuff, and they're not doing it for some reason, so that's interesting. So the US cleared out of Yemen. They left their embassy in January. Admittedly, there's a large CIA station in Yemen, okay, and this is where Obama was supposedly doing these drone strikes, which have made, you've all heard this in the news, America's drone strikes in Yemen, taking out Anwar al-Awlaki. Okay, the same Anwar al-Awlaki was having lunch at the Pentagon, okay, before he got killed. So is he a double agent? Probably. But anyway, put that aside. So the drone strikes in Yemen, I'm suspicious of that as kind of some sort of cover. It could be a distraction to create an image that something's going on over here, meanwhile something else is going on over there. So is the CIA involved with AQAP, Al-Qaeda in the Arabian Peninsula? Who knows? But I would say it's highly probable that some intelligence agency is pulling the puppet strings of Al-Qaeda in the Arabian Peninsula. Okay, so U.S. will not be going into Yemen. Instead, they're going to send Saudi Arabia to do the dirty work. Okay, now, I don't want to get into the specifics of it, but I'll tell you that Yemen is not as backward of a country as our media portrays it to be. Politically, they are very sophisticated, very advanced. They want it to be a republic. And every single foreign power has done everything possible to keep that from happening since the 1960s. Okay? This is a country that aspires to be a constitutional republic or, you know, modern democracy. And anybody and everything is getting in the way of that happening. And lo and behold, Saudi Arabia declared war on their neighbor just at the time when the current president had overstayed his mandate. He was supposed to leave office. They were supposed to form a new government with a new constitution. Lo and behold, the bombing campaign begins. So there's back to the Stone Ages again. No democracy in Yemen. No, no, no. Not the right democracy. So a lot of sectarian strife, people being killed. What's going to happen? Well, there's people going to remember that for 20, 30, 40 years. So again, divide and rule. You create absolute division now, guaranteed for decades. Same in Syria, much worse in fact, and in Libya and some of these places. This is the result, okay? Sectarian divisions, beautiful. Look at Iraq. Divide and rule. So Saudi didn't have any troops on the ground. They're just doing airstrikes to subdue the Houthi rebels, who the U.S. and everyone else claims is backed by Iran. I kept hearing that over and over. It's not true. They might be somehow supported politically by Iran, but they're not backed by Iran. Okay? They're not a religious movement, the rebels there. But Saudi Arabia have boots on the ground. They're called Al-Qaeda in the Arabian Peninsula, because they're fighting against the Houthis as well. So you have the Al-Qaeda in the Arabian Peninsula fighting, helping the Saudi Arabian airstrikes, ground cover, air cover, against the same guy. So they're on the same side. They have the same objectives. So they are the same thing. But our media and our politicians speak of them as if they are different. They have exactly the same objectives. So they're just pulling the wool over your eyes, again. Okay? So, you'd expect that Saudi Arabian intelligence would have a really strong hand to play in AQAP, because it's their next door neighbor. Okay? It's expected. So the United States said, when this war started, they said, we're not going to join in on the bombing. It's just a Saudi Arabian project, but we will provide satellite support, targeting information, and we'll even go in and rescue any pilots that get shot down. but we're not involved. No, 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 we're going to stay on the sidelines on this one, right? So that's what they announced, okay? 2 days later, the Russian consulate in Aden, the capital city in the south, gets bombed. So somebody gave the target information to the Saudi Air Force of the Russian embassy. That's interesting. I wonder who did that. But again, as that happened, now that's a very dangerous situation, okay? Remember when the Chinese embassy got bombed in Belgrade during the Yugoslavian bombing in the late 90s? Diplomatically, that's it's very testy. Can create a lot of problems, okay? Now, this is, with the situation with Russia, as volatile as it is between the West and Russia, this doesn't help, does it? But this is the sort of thing that went on. So they went into denial after that, released a press release saying, no, no, we're not involved at all, and it was a mistake. But the press release from 2 weeks before said that they were providing satellite data and target information. So let's just erase the history and then make a new narrative. That's what happened. So clearly, so this is the grand chessboard of the region. Now, so this is the Red Sea. So up the Red Sea is the Suez Canal. That's Egypt. That's the entryway into the Mediterranean. This is one of the most. This is probably the busiest shipping lane, one of the top 2 or 3 in the world. This shipping lane here, into the Gulf of Aden, up the Red Sea to the Suez Canal. And this is where here's Somalia. This is where all the piracy goes on out there as well. So here's Yemen. So see this little country here? That's called Djibouti, that little one. That is basically a glorified U.S. military base, come small African nation. Okay, this is where most of the drone flights and sorties take off that work in this region. Okay, so that's that choke point. The United States has control of this. So that's a very important waterway. So here's Iran, and you have a very, geostrategically, this is so important, okay? This is as important as the Persian Gulf, okay? U.S. AFRICOM, United States commanding control of AFRICOM, it's called AFRICOM, officially launched in 2007 under George Bush. Okay, that is, it says in their initial documents, which they removed already from their website, that the main goal is to evict Chinese influence out of Africa. Because while the U.S. was mucking around in Iraq, the Chinese were busy making headway in Africa, doing infrastructure swaps, getting mineral rights deals, all sorts of stuff. So the fear in the United States Pentagon and the major chessboard planners is that China will develop to such a degree that they will eventually need to deploy troops overseas to protect their assets and interests in places like Africa. And that is the red line that Washington or the West or NATO will not tolerate, basically. So they formed AFRICOM to try to work China out of Africa. And since AFRICOM, the U.S. had no military bases to speak of, maybe some presence in Morocco, I'm not sure, before, the last 10 years. Now they've got troops in 43 African countries. This is under President Obama, very quick, very rapid. And when Obama leaves, the next president, doesn't matter what party he's from, will continue that growth, okay? It's to dominate Africa and to basically put the Chinese out. Libya, the Chinese got put out in a big way. They had tens of billions invested in Libya, lost everything. Lost it right off. Gone, okay? So here, this is very important, this area. China also had, so Sudan got partitioned a couple years ago. That no one did make big headlines, but China has its, down here in the south is where China had a lot of its oil strikes. But the pipeline to the through Sudan had to be accessed through here. When the country split, China's interests were cut off. They're stranded in the south. That was also part of that geostrategic move. So Yemen, same. Yemen used to be split into two countries, the north and the south. This is the most important island. It's called Socotra. I've never heard of this island. That is the most important strategic point, one of the most important points on the globe. The U.S. has been lobbying to put a major base there for years. And I don't know if they put stakes down yet, but they're very close. Okay. Now, that's also one of the most beautiful archipelagos in the world, like Easter Island. Okay, I didn't know that. So from a nature point of view, it's amazing. That could get devastated if it turns into a military base. Okay, this is Socotra. There are things on this island that no one has ever seen, do not exist anywhere on the planet. They exist there. Plant species, formation, and then the different Byzantine, and you can see the history, it's in the soil. In Yemen, it's preserved. Really old stuff is preserved. Saudi Arabia doesn't have that kind of history. They don't have that sort of rich culture like some of their neighbors do, like Syria. And for some reason, Islamic extremists like ISIS or extremist Taliban factions or Wahhabis, they don't mind sort of turning this into rubble for some reason. I don't know why that is, if it's they want to erase that history, because in terms of the people of Yemen, they're really proud of that. That's part of their identity. That's a strong thing. You have to break that will, you also need to break their culture. And that's colonialism 101. Okay, so that's what I see Saudi Arabia half involved in with their little foray in Yemen and Syria. So here's a little interesting segment that I think everyone will enjoy. Informants, patsies, dupes, and other useful idiots. Okay, this is where it gets interesting. So I'm gonna run through a few little examples of some of these. Okay, and we'll see who's who. Okay, 7/7 bombers. This picture ran on the front page of every newspaper 10 years ago. I remember where I was in London. I remember that day, I really remember that day, because I had a lot of people, friends out, going to work, and immediately you're on the phone saying, "You okay?" Phones were down or difficult to make connections. That was a kind of scary day. But you know, I didn't know what to think about it. And then this picture came out, and this was on the front of the Mirror, I think. And I looked at this. I was looking at this issue back then. I saved this, by the way. And I'm thinking about. I used to teach Photoshop at college. I taught Adobe software, so I know my way around image manipulation. And then I saw this bar going in. One bar from this is going in the back and one in the front. So I'm thinking to myself, how's that possible? How can you walk through a bar, a fence? But somehow it happened in this picture. So immediately I thought, well, that person was photoshopped in, or the bar was photoshopped. I don't know. It just didn't look right. I don't know. But a lot of other people noticed that too. But it's just one indication that it's possible that this particular CCTV snapshot of the 7/7 bombers could have been manipulated. I don't know. A few digital forensic people have looked at this and come to that conclusion. Okay? So I'm not asking anything outrageous here. So, who are these guys? Why, they look like they're dressed on a day out. They bought return tickets. One of them argued with the ticket guy over, he didn't get the Super Saver fare or something like that. Strange behavior for somebody who's supposedly on a suicide mission. So what were they doing? Who were they really working for on the day? Did they die on the bombings on those tube trains, or were they, two of them shot trying to enter a major newspaper, Canary Wharf, which was reported on the news that day? Does anybody remember that report? I remember that report. Okay. I also remember the report at Stockwell Station where they say that a guy had wires sticking out of his jacket. I mean, just crazy. Those are what I call official conspiracy theories. Okay, turns out John Charles Jimenez wasn't wearing a puffy bomber jacket with wires sticking out. He went through, paid with his oyster, went through, wasn't running, and got gang tackled on the platform on Stockwell, and they pumped 11 slugs into his head. And he was Brazilian. It's very strange. But anyway, moving on swiftly. So, maximizing your resilience in an uncertain world. Do you know whose slogan that is? Someone knows. Visor Consultants. So this, and I don't know if you've had Nick Kollerstrom. Yeah, he's awesome. Okay, so Nick has outlined all this.
Nick didn't do the 77 tour. We done a different.
Oh, he did different. But his book is excellent. I think it's Terror on the Tube. So this Peter Power was running a drill on the same day with bombs hitting exactly the same tube stations that incorporated 1,000 people in total. Okay, Visor Consultants. Interesting. Nick told me who paid for that drill, by the way. I forgot, but I need to double check. But funny enough, Panorama did a special a year earlier about talking about a potential terror attack on London, and Peter Power was on that program as well. So who knows what Peter Power's role is? I think he's been duped, personally. Okay, I don't see him as a hardcore operative. But there was a drill running on the day, hitting bombs at Edgware Road, King's Cross, Tavistock Square, possibly. What's the coincidence of that? What are the odds of that? Impossible to calculate. So, there's Visor. So were the boys at Luton Station part of the Visor drill? Is that, they were being paid, perhaps? I don't think they were doing it for free. Okay. So, Jermaine Lindsay was one of the 7-7 bombers. And this is the Black Widow. So this is Samantha Luthway, I think that's her name. Anyway, she's supposedly married to Jermaine Lindsay. I think that's him with her. So she's this Black Widow terror mastermind, according to The Sun and other notable, reputable red tops. So there she is. And somehow her name came up during the Kenya Mall massacre last year. Remember that? She was supposedly the mastermind. So she's got 3 kids in tow. Somehow as a single mom, she's got prams pushing. She's got a fag in one hand, like what's her name? What's that show? Little Britain. She's got fag, pram. 3 kids. Manages to mastermind the Kenya Mall massacre. Very impressive. Okay. So, but what is she really? What is the Black Widow really? There's a few others. Jihadi Jane. I mean, I'd love to do a whole seminar on Black Widows. There's like 4 or 5 of them. They're really, really good too. So Jihadi Jane was another one. Who are these people? Where is she? They can't find her. With all her kids in tow, and she's difficult to track down apparently. She could be hiding on a council estate somewhere in Swindon. Who knows? But they can't find her, the mastermind, the terror mastermind. I mean, how hard? She's not hiding in Africa because she'd stick out like a sore thumb. So, what's going on? So it's very similar. So is Samantha Luthway really, could she be playing a role, perhaps? Could she be a handler, possibly? Could she be an informant? She's not a patsy. I think her husband was, probably. Yeah.
There's no saying she's not dead.
Well, exactly. We don't know anything about her. So, this is the Boston bombing. So this is Tamerlan Tazaranoff, fact, was recruited by the FBI to be an informant. Okay, that's a pretty important part of that story, personally, in my opinion. But hey, I'm just a crazy conspiracy theorist. Why should I ask those sort of questions? So there's his wife. She's a Anglo-Saxon Muslim convert. They're common law marriage, by the way, or muta marriage, as it's called in Islam. So, Catherine Russell, she's got an interesting backstory too. I think it's her grandfather was either, I'm not sure, a director in the CIA. I'm not sure what his actual title was. Yeah, he was a member of Skull and Bones, but so what? Lots of people were. But that's Uncle Ruslan. He's married to the daughter of the former director of the FBI. Right? That's his uncle, Uncle Ruslan. He came out in the media, gave a big diatribe. Oh, that was crazy, they deserve to die, and extremists, blah, blah, blah. So there's a lot more going on in this story than just two Chechnyan Americans and let off bombs at the finish line. You know, there's a lot more going on. Because I'll tell you what, the FBI flashed his picture and his brother, who just got sentenced to death two weeks ago. They put those up on the national media and said, we don't know who these are, we need your help to identify them. Of course they knew who they were, because he was being recruited as an informant. They have a file on him, his brother, they know what he eats for breakfast. Okay? But they stood there to the public and stuck that out there and said, we don't know who these guys are. That's how much contempt these players have for the public. So, this is Garland, Texas, ISIS-inspired event in Texas. Really interesting, that one, if you study that. So he had a handler who's a confidential informant. This is Eldon Simpson. He's a convert to Islam with an ISIS-inspired attack. So he had a Sudanese name, last name is Dang, was his handler, FBI informant, was paid $126,000 US to basically shadow him and take him around and probably radicalize him, quite frankly, okay? And so we don't hear from the handler, he's not on the news, he just disappeared, okay? This guy, supposedly, with his partner, tried to shoot up a Muhammad cartoon contest in Texas and didn't make it out of the car. Hundreds of rounds were fired into the car. They're dead. Well, we're told they're dead anyway. So he looks like a patsy if he indeed died on that day, which I don't know. I have to see the coroner's report. But that's Eldon Simpson. Had a handler. So that's a patsy. Handled by an informant. That's in the mainstream news. So it's probably close to factual at least. That was the Garland ISIS attack. And of course the talking point here is that ISIS is coming over the Mexican border. We need to secure our border. It's Obama's fault, blah, 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 blah. Okay. So the whole story of that Garland is based on tweets. That was their evidence that they were connected with ISIS. So Twitter is like the new validator for all this stuff. So this is the tweet that they supposedly managed to get off while they were, I don't know, getting out of the car, shooting, I don't know. But at some point, they managed to type this amazing tweet out, and it's from an account called Sharia is Light. It's a picture of Anwar al-Awlaki. It's absolutely perfect. The bro and me and myself have given bay'ah to Amirul Mu'mineen. May Allah accept us as mujahideen. Make dua. Right. And this is the best part. Hashtag Texas attack. So they thought up that hashtag. Really interesting. Because that hashtag trended like crazy on Twitter. That's the first place it appeared. The other person who helped was a British hacker, ISIS hacker named Al Brittani. That's his handle, his Twitter handle. So he's an interesting character. He got arrested for hacking supposedly Tony Blair's email account a couple of years ago. Did time, I don't know, in Belmarsh, maybe, I'm not sure. But is it possible that that guy, what happened to him while he was inside? Could he have been turned? Quite possibly. He supposedly fled to Syria to join ISIS as they let him out of prison. So, who is he? Who is he? Does he exist? We don't know, because it all happens on Twitter. So he was the guy who was supposedly recruited these two ISIS-inspired terrorists in Texas. I mean, it just gets muddier and muddier. So, does anybody know what a man-in-the-middle attack is? So, in a sort of tradecraft, you have to sit, with all this virtual stuff going on with Twitter, it's very easy to position a man in the middle, or two men in the middle. But you don't know what you're seeing is what it is. I could make a Twitter account, you could make a Twitter account, you could say anything at any time connected with any event, but if the media points to it, they're using that to validate and to create backstories. Twitter. Ridiculous. Okay? So, very easy man-in-the-middle situation here with Twitter. This guy, Elton Simpson, who knows the story? We don't know the story because it's classified, because it's secret, because it's clandestine. But you can't talk about any of these events without talking about the clandestine aspects of it. It's like you're looking at, you're missing like 90% of the story, okay? So it's about pulling the veil back. And the problem is we have so much of this now. There are agencies within agencies within agencies. America has 50 intelligence agencies, national security agencies, 50. Maybe, I don't even know if the Nazis had that many. They had quite a few during the Second World War. And that regime collapsed under the weight of its secret state as well. People began not trusting each other, undermining each other, and so forth. So here's another one, Jihadi John. Mohammed Amwazi. Who is he? I don't know. Do we really know? Not really. But anyway, we're told that he was being pressured by the security services. So is he an informant, a patsy, a dupe, a useful idiot, or is he just a fictional avatar? Okay, one of those five probably. Is he it's so theatrical, this Jihadi John thing, it's just ridiculous how this was played out in the media. But this created a lot of fear. Okay, so British MI5 had tried to recruit. Amwazi is an informant, oh my God. So maybe he is an informant. This reminds me of our friend from the Willits attack as well. He was being pressured to be an informant. And there's another guy who's doing a hard time in America. His name is Madi Hashi from Camden, healthcare worker. He's going down to a federal pen now. He would not become an informant, so he became a target. He was 22 years old. I think he got a raw deal. So anyway, so all of these, you have the Ahmadi Coulibaly, okay, this is a little list. World Trade Center bombing, 1993. They let it happen. That's fact, history. FBI was intimately involved in recruiting, assembling the cell. They had their guy managing the others, provided the money for the van, the explosives, everything. And guess what? They let the bomb go off in 1993 under the World Trade Center. Okay? That's the World Trade Center. And the media still talk about it like it was an Al-Qaeda attack in America. That was an FBI attack, is what it was. That would not have happened if not for the FBI making it happen. I mean, I'm talking, you guys probably understand this very well because you're familiar with this material, but the average person, you try to get this through their head and they struggle a little bit because they didn't get all these details. They just got the end punchline, okay? So, that's a historic, if anyone's arguing with you about, is this possible, just talk about the 93 World Trade Center bombing. That's an obvious one, okay? That'll knock down half of your debaters right there. Ahmadi Coulibaly, he was also intimately involved with some high-profile terrorists through the prison system in Paris. One of them did attempted a terror attack on the U.S. Embassy in Paris, okay? So the U.S. security establishment, of course, knew who he was and his associates. But we're told he just appeared on the scene at Charlie Hebdo and took down a kosher grocery store and shot 4 people. He's got a very interesting backstory. Ottawa shooter, there's another one, October. He was under surveillance, no-fly list. They took his passport, but somehow he managed to pull out this deadly shooting in Ottawa and terrorize the whole of Canada. What did he do? Not a whole lot. Okay? Okay, moving on. Tamerlan, recruited by the FBI, Boston bomber. Underwear bomber. I've had Kurt Haskell on my show quite a few times. He was on the plane with Umar Farouk Abdul-Malatab. Okay? He testified that This man was allowed to board a plane in Amsterdam with no passport. How many of you have boarded a plane internationally without a passport? Anybody? Is it possible? So he had a guy, a sharp-dressed man with a suit, brought him on the plane. There was another guy on the plane who was sitting across from him that he was handed off to, and he supposedly had an underwear bomb. This young, we're told, son of a Nigerian banker, Umar Farouk, was the underwear bomber. And it had no explosives. So what was it? Well, it was a terrorist attack, apparently. And so Kurt Haskell documented this to a great degree, was ignored by the US media. So they still talk about this like he was from, guess where, Yemen. And he was being supposedly managed by AQAP, again, back to this Yemen thing. So they still talk about this in the Yemen story now. But it was a fake event, completely fake, okay? Now, there's a few of these patsies, Buford Rogers, recently in America, Jared Miller, Las Vegas shooter, was working with the police as a witness or informant before Bundy Ranch, went on a cop shooting spree, killed 2 people, ended up dead in a Walmart, I think. Case closed. Usually ends up dead. So, Najee Mansur, there was another one, the Christmas tree bomber, had an informant. The list goes on and on, okay? So we got plenty of examples, okay? So this is my favorite. This is the Danish Al-Qaeda. This is Agent Storm. So we're supposed to believe that this guy infiltrated Al-Qaeda and he was Anwar al-Awlaqi's right-hand man. Okay, this is written by Morton Storm. That's his name, his stage name. There he is. So I'm sure he blended in really well in Yemen, as one does.
Back to 50.
Yeah. So there he is, one of his publicity shots, okay? This is the most bogus story ever. The co-author is Paul Cruikshank. Who's Paul Cruikshank? And again, he's supposedly Agent Storm was supplying young Eastern European brides to Anwar al-Awlaki. Right, okay. So, that's CNN's terror expert. He's the author of that book. So we're supposed to believe that he's credible. His name is Paul Cruikshank. He's British, lives, I believe he's based in America. So he's one of these experts. They bring them in to basically draw out the narratives, Charlie Hebdo, any of these terrorist events. So he's the expert. And it's literally the government line. Absolutely defensive. Paul O'Neill killed Osama bin Laden, Navy SEAL. Okay? So, just to let you know, I'm not blowing smoke here. The day after the bin Laden raid, the news agency called me, said, do you want to come talk about this? I thought, wow, this is an exciting one. Osama bin Laden. So they asked me a few questions, and I'll let you listen. But no one's ever said anything to me about this, and a lot of people have seen this. It's got a lot of views on YouTube. No one's ever called me a conspiracy theorist or a kook, okay? And Seymour Hersh just came out a couple of weeks ago, famous New York journalist, Pulitzer Prize-winning journalist, saying that the bin Laden raid was bogus, finally. So this was me a day after the raid, before Obama came on the press conference, by the way.
Speculation has died down. What do you think will be the significance of bin Laden's death for the U.S. and abroad?
I think initially for the U.S., there's 2 things. First, we need to look at the fact that the current administration in the U.S. is going into a new election cycle in 2012. Now, what this announcement by bin Laden achieves for him is a great line on his resume as a wartime president. And also, with poll numbers that were kind of really down in the doldrums the last 2-3 years, domestically, this administration is suffering. This gives him some credence overseas. And also, if the U.S. chooses to engage in a new conflict like a Libya or an Iran over the next 12 months, this is going to help Obama, because American voters generally won't change leadership during a hot conflict. And that would really solidify his chances for re-election in 2012.
Now, a number of analysts have said that on the program that since bin Laden's death was announced that the U.S. might use it as a justification to expand the war on terror. Why do you think this will affect the U.S. foreign policy?
I think initially, you have to look at the U.S. in terms of, from 2001, the U.S., Britain, NATO countries have erected what's like a security state. So we have terror warnings come out, or bin Laden video comes out, then we go into high alert. So the security services will say there's a high threat level right now. We've seen exactly this. Immediately after Obama's speech, we've gone to the ABC, CBS, major media networks reporting that it's a heightened state of alert and people must be vigilant in case someone wants to avenge the death of Osama bin Laden. So in the beginning, we'll see a heightened security state. I believe that this signals the fact that the U.S. in the long term may be moving away from the war on terror, the shadowy enemy of al-Qaeda, and refocusing on a nation-state enemy, i.e. a Libya, a Syria, and of course in Iran in the next 12 months.
And what about the fate of al-Qaeda now that it's lost its leader?
Well, al-Qaeda, I mean, I refer to Osama bin Laden as the busiest corpse in show business. For the last 10 years, he's been doing absolutely nothing. There's been multiple reports that he has, in fact, died. We have official sort of statement from Benazir Bhutto in 2007 on David Frost saying that Osama bin Laden was dead. Madeleine Albright admission in 2003. Musharraf in 2002. Reports about him on a dialysis machine in a hospital in Dubai in 2001. So Al-Qaeda, according to Robin Cook, the late Robin Cook, Foreign Secretary of the UK, it's a database. It's a list of ex-Mujahideen and the next generation of Mujahideen who are employed in civil wars around the world. So Al-Qaeda is not an organization, I believe, and many would agree with me, that it has offices and a hierarchy as such. It's more of a brand.
Do you think that the U.S. is going to release photographs or evidence of the fate of bin Laden, of his corpse, of the burial at sea? Do you think that would be a wise decision?
You know what? If I was a betting man, I would say that there will be no photographs and no videos released at all. At the best, we're going to get grainy videos of some kind of a raid, and we might, if we're lucky, get a photograph of a mutilated corpse. There's been really a lot of controversy in the actual identification process of this bin Laden corpse in the last 2 days. First, AP claimed that they've had a DNA testing that was matched against his sister who died of brain cancer. Reuters reported that no, there hasn't been DNA testing yet. And meanwhile, the U.S. has said they dumped his body in the Arabian Sea 24 hours after catching him. So habeas corpus, we have a slight problem with the evidence of the actual physical Osama bin Laden, which is going to have people scratching their heads for as long as they've been scratching their heads since Kennedy was assassinated.
All right, Patrick Henningsen, journalist and editor at 21st Century Wire. Thanks for your time.
The voice of reason.
So no one ever knocked me down for that. So I don't know. Maybe it's true. So the ISIS thing carries on. Bin Laden raped. They're tying off the loose ends on Osama bin Laden. You see the story that just came out about his book collection. So they're saying he's a 9/11 truther. So the media is on one hand saying that bin Laden did 9/11, and then on the other hand, he's a 9/11 truther, but you can't really be both. I don't know, that's just me. But, so this is ISIS in the back garden of some house. I don't know where this was filmed, it's kind of funny.
They're everywhere.
It's in a they're doing like somersaults and breaking cinder blocks on their heads. Do you ever see those really fantastic. So, all the beheading videos, most of them, they didn't actually show anybody being beheaded. The camera would cut right at that point. So this is a Jihadi John. Supposedly this is James Foley. What do we know? What do we really know? It wasn't shown on camera. So this is touted as a murder. But we don't have any evidence. We don't know where this took place. So in a court of law, we have no crime scene. We have no murder weapon. We have no date of death. We have nothing. What do we have? A YouTube video? Doesn't even show the head being cut off. That's not much. So it's not enough to go to a court of law with. There's no CSI at all. So, and there's quite a few of these. So there's Rita Katz. She's the head of SITE. She's an Israeli-American. So she gets first crack, apparently, in all these great videos. So this was the one of the Jordanian pilot being burned alive. We did a really good analysis on this, breaking it down frame by frame. Of course, you could probably push this cage over if you really, your life was, depended on it, but there's just a lot of these anomalies. And look at some of the faces of these guys. They just captured this pilot. These are all the ISIS guys, wearing beautifully, perfectly brand new. It's like there's a wardrobe department. I mean, they're all the same. I've worked in film, and I've worked on wardrobes, and this is how you do it. You have basically everything on a hanger, and you get them dressed up, and it's usually perfect condition. It takes a lot of work to stage these things. So this guy doesn't look too Arab to me. He looks interesting. He's got glasses, reading glasses. That guy looks definitely European, at least. Anyway, they're all masked, so you can't see them anyway. Isn't that the whole part of the whole gag, though, with ISIS? All masked. So it's really, this is kind of like what you're left with here. It's Tintin in Iraq. I don't know. That terrifies me. So Bibi is providing aid and comfort to these guys spilling over the Syrian border into Israel. How do I know this? Well, they're running airstrikes, 6 bombing campaigns in the last 18 months, hitting anyone who is fighting al-Nusra or ISIS. So is Israel providing a little air support, perhaps? Well, I just look in, this is the last report from the UN's Disengagement Observer Force. This is covering November to March of this year, and clearly describes backwards and forward communications between Syrian rebel forces and the IDF. Okay, so that's a UN report. It's not made up, it's real. So that's the Iranians and the Iraqis, big hoopla. Iranians trying to fight ISIS, bad. Washington's not happy. And the whole point of this, yes, this is happening overseas, but it's to get us basically afraid at home. Because let me tell you, it looks like they're ready to drop the hammer on the homeland. And it's not because ISIS is a threat. It's because we are sort of due for another, what they call a defining event, to really ratchet up the security state, the police state. That's what it feels like. How many of you noticed the statements by David Cameron in the last 6 months? Kind of talking about extremists and conspiracy theorists, and we need to roll back with people we've been too tolerant in Britain. Okay? It's kind of disturbing talk.
Terrorist training campus.
Well, yeah, not just this, but the point is, why are they so confident to say such things in public? Are they planning something? I don't know. I hope not.
It's a cake and a mandate.
Yeah, you're right.
No coalition.
So here's the end game for America. It's some kind of confrontation with Iran, and I think we all know that's on the cards. Can we stop that? I'm not sure. So we get to the George Bush. This guy could become president in 18 months. This is Jeb Bush. He's on board with his brother. Attaboy, no pun intended with the Atta. And this is the sort of thing that I saw when I was in the States. This is a federal base camp outside of Bundy Ranch, with 200 armed agents, armed to the teeth. Okay, so I did a presentation at 86 about that. That's real. It's real stuff. But this is in America, so we're a little more advanced with our militarization of law enforcement. But Britain is definitely a force to be reckoned with. So it's kind of like the federale system. It's what you have in Mexico, but those are American agents, by the way. So this is a real photo taken at Bundy Ranch from the bridge, looking down at the standoff. But we have many of those at 21st Century Wire. They didn't come to talk nice. They came for a serious confrontation. Luckily, nobody got hurt, thankfully. So, but this is what they set up at Bundy Ranch. This is the First Amendment area. We have these too. You need permits to protest now, free speech areas. Imagine that in America. Imagine. That's real. That's a photograph taken. Do you see anybody in it? Thank God, no. No one went in. That's a pen that they constructed. Looks like it's something for cows, but none of the cowboys wanted to be in the cow pen, thank God. So, but I worked on a film with the UK column, which will be released soon, called, it's about foot and mouth. This is an investigation into the foot and mouth crisis in 2000, 2001. Very powerful piece of film, documentary. That'll be coming out soon. Working on this. It's a film about the Bundy Ranch, documentary film, about halfway through right now. So we're going to keep pressing forward with that. But so that's a radio show Sunday, talk radio, 3 hours. Some people really like it, so we're getting some good feedback from our listeners and trying to keep it real. There they are. That's the party that you'll never get invited to, and some really interesting, really people there. So. That's another show that I produce on Wednesday called The Boiler Room. We started inspired by Nicholas Tesla, the alternate current radio network, that we just, a few friends put that online a few months ago. It's doing really well. Definitely that's open. And that's it. So we have a newsletter, sign up at the table up there, free newsletter, daily dose of truth every day. By email. I don't share the list with anybody, so a full Snowden guarantee on the privacy. You give me your email for that list, that's the only place it's ever going to be. So we don't share lists with anybody. But anyway, just want to say also thanks to Andy, and I've been watching you guys on Facebook for quite some time. So you have probably one of the biggest, most active Truth Juice in the country, right?
Yeah.
So, congratulations to all you guys for keeping it alive, because you guys are doing some great work here, allowing great people to come in here and sharing information, sharing knowledge and stuff like that. So, but we had any time for Q&A?
Yeah, man, I want to say thanks. Well, we have to applaud.